Hey folks, this is sort of a longer episode, so I don't want to take too much time on the front end here, other than to say that Nostalgia Trap is, as always, sponsored by nobody except the listeners who enjoy the show and contribute to our Patreon page. The link is in the episode description. I think it's one of the best bargains on the internet. You get access to all of our bonus episodes over the last 10 years, plus my weekly News Trap wrap-ups, and maybe the best thing is access to the Patreon discussion board where like-minded individuals can marvel at what's going on in the country. It's a frequent source of comfort and ideas for me, and I appreciate everyone that contributes to those discussions. So please check that out and enjoy this conversation. This is me and my good friend Peter Sabatino talking about a book that had a deep impact on both of us. It's called Van Gogh, The Life by Stephen Naifeh and Gregory White Smith. And I hope you enjoy our thoughts. Well, all right, my friends.
Shit, piss,
yeah,
piss. Sorry,
piss and
no,
shit. Yeah, Peter
no,
Sabatino ruining everything.
no, go ahead. Do it again. Do it again.
Okay, I'll do it again. All right, welcome everybody to Nostalgia Trap. David Parsons here. I hope you're doing well. I'm just going to get right into it because I'm very happy to be talking on Zoom with my good friend Peter Sabatino, who is in London, which I don't really know where that is. Is that near New York somewhere? I'm not sure.
It's in Asia. It's in Asia.
Oh yeah, Central Asia,
Yeah.
of course.
Central
London,
Asia.
Central Asia.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, Peter. We've been talking
Of
about doing this
course.
one forever.
Yeah.
This is a story. Today, we're telling a story of the healing power of books to save a person's life, or at least in a less precious way, make life tolerable. Because, like, I don't know, was it like a year ago? You were like asking me, "Hey, can you just recommend a book, like something you were? I think you were looking for like a big biography or something." And I happened to have read this book about Vincent Van Gogh. It's called Van Gogh, The Life by Stephen Naifeh and Gregory White Smith. I read this during the pandemic, like later in the pandemic, and it just blew my mind. But I feel like you've just took off with this book. Like Van Gogh has been a big part of your life ever since you started reading this. Um, we both became it's hard not to become like a Van Gogh obsessive when you read this book.
It's it's kind of insane actually. Yeah, it was about a year ago, and I had remembered seeing this biography, and I probably was on your shelf maybe, years ago, or when I had visited you. Um and so it was in my mind. So when I asked you for a recommendation for a biography, um it was sort of in the back of my mind. And then when you suggested it, I was like, yep, that's it.
Yeah.
For some reason, like, it was an unknown kind of quality that I just immediately was like, yes, that's the book I'm going to read.
I felt the same way when I actually I think I looked for this book. I was like, I want a book about a big artist or something, and I just was on Amazon literally. And it was like, what's the big biography on Van Gogh? And this is the one. These people
Oh,
all
this was not recommended to you. You had just literally,
well,
um,
Claudia reads a lot of big biographies of artists and painters, especially, but she didn't read about Van Gogh. I really don't remember. I think it was just I just wanted to read something huge. It was like pandemic time. Like, give me 1,000-page book just to like read a life of. And I also read like a huge book about Joe Kennedy during that era. And I think
I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
yeah, and I wanted to read about someone more inspiring than Joe Kennedy, someone who like lobotomized his own daughter.
Oh
um,
God.
but
Yeah.
I ended up. I mean, Van Gogh is kind of an asshole too. Honestly, I'll just say this before we even get started. And I know this was your experience too. I felt really close to Vincent Van Gogh reading this book. Like, I was like, he's in the room with me. I feel like I understood what kind of guy he was. The authors just did an extraordinary job of like painting a picture of sort of what Van Gogh might have been like. And It made sense. It all made sense to me.
It's so difficult to kind of figure out where to begin, with all of it. But I think I think a good place, and you just talked about it, was these two authors. Like they created something special, like not just because of the subject that was fascinating. I think they weaved an incredible story, and I think a more complex story than anyone had kind of touched on before. Like you see these Van Gogh myths, right? And they're everywhere. And like I was watching some really cheesy, Van Gogh like PBS documentaries on YouTube like last night. And this myth of the uh, ultimate tortured artist,
Right, right.
right? Which is not untrue, but these two authors created just an incredible work of nuance beyond just that kind of tortured artist. And you really did connect with him while you were reading it. And I mean, I became and am obsessed because of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've been figuring out for the last year, like what it is, like why, and I think, I have some ideas on that, but we could
Yeah.
expand from whatever point.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I know why, Peter, in part because it's like I remember. I mean, we've known each other for more than 20 years, right? Like,
Yeah.
and and we were very young men. We're still young men. We're still young men. Um,
Yes, I feel like I'm 41.
right. But I remember you saying at some point, they're like, if nothing works out in my life, I could just like be a homeless guy, like in the park, just painting. And I always have that
Uh,
that image of you, because I don't know, both of us, I think we connected as friends in part because I don't know, we had an appreciation for art, not just as like an accessory to life or as like a decoration of life, but like as a path, like a kind of way of understanding the world. And like that's
yeah.
what I think, to start off, like let's maybe do it chronologically, because one of the things that popped out to me from the beginning of this book is like Van Gogh's childhood and like his family life. And he always seemed like a kind of like, I don't know, I don't think they ever use the word psychedelic in here, but it seems like he had a kind of psychedelic vision of the world from the beginning. Like nature and vision to him came to him almost in a very like deeply spiritual, religious way that actually most people are going to think he's crazy, and maybe he kind of is, but that's key to the art, right? Like the whole childhood of him, like being this kind of like weirdo that roams around. His family drives me crazy because they didn't seem to understand him or like him or want him
That
around.
that to me was one of the more fascinating parts that kind of hooked me right away, was that he became so sympathetic like from the get-go, because yes, it was 125 years ago and people didn't have an understanding of like mental illness or even being like, I don't know, showing care for a son that's a little different, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Like they were, I got a picture from this book that they were fucking cruel to him, you know?
Yes.
Like, yes, he was difficult. And like we can get into that. And of course, there's a flip side to this, but he got zero from his family. Like nothing. Like just constant. He was a constant disappointment. He was told so. He was the black sheep. So like he was already mental illness or no, like already like a step behind. And like that to me drew me in because I felt that so strongly,
Yeah.
and credit to these two guys, it's
Yeah, I know.
incredible.
And they wrote a book about Jackson Pollock, I think,
I'm
before
reading it
this.
right now. I'm
Oh
reading it.
shit.
Yeah.
Now I have to read a fucking 1,000 pages about some drunk asshole throwing throw it. But
Yeah.
you know what? It makes sense, honestly, that Pollock and Van Gogh would go together, like in some way?
Absolutely. And we can get into that. I'm sort of like
Well, yeah.
Del
Why do you think that is? Because I feel like I kind of have a general idea, but
well, I mean, if we don't have to like nerd out too much about art history, but
they do a
like
lot of it in the book. That's what's so great. The book is like an
yeah,
education on art. I didn't know
yeah,
90% of this shit.
yeah. I mean, Van Gogh is a direct line to like all of modern painting that comes after him. Like because he's coming on the heels of the Impressionists, which were like, Monet and those guys and Pissarro. They were capturing like a moment, but as it was, like with the light. But it was an impression. So they kind of broke the mold of like traditional, studio painting. But
Hmm.
Van Gogh went one step further and he's like, I'm not going to capture a moment. I'm going to inject myself into it. And I'm going to choose colors that aren't real but that accentuate some feeling that I want to get out of that.
Hmm.
Like from the viewer,
Yeah.
from the viewer. And that was new. Like people weren't doing that. Like that was considered kind of radical. So then like you could see how easily like the next step, which was like the expressionists were getting more abstract and more like pouring themselves into the painting.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he was kind of the first, he was like that breaking point, that mold. So, like, there's a direct line from Van Gogh to Pollock, you know?
Right.
It was
Right.
like a series of abstractions. Like, they just kept getting more abstract and more kind of emotion versus, you know, uh, capturing a moment or whatever, you
Or
know?
rendering something exactly as it's quoted, like
Yes.
some
Yeah.
objective reality.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Um,
what gets me is like how much everyone like shit on him on the paintings, like other painters. Like one of the moments that I love from the book, and I haven't read it in a while, so I have like only the like most memorable moments in my head. But one of them was like when Van Gogh tries to go to art school for a little bit, and like
yeah.
the other students are like laughing at him. They think like everything he's doing is stupid, and it's like, and then they just dismiss him completely, and he leaves. But I'm like, dude, those people were painting next to Van Gogh, and like were laughing at what he was doing, and like this is like
Yeah.
the greatest master of the of the last few centuries of art. It's unbelievable. The other part of it that I wanted to get your take on is that the fact that he produced most of his stuff, like in the last 2 years of his life is when he really
Yeah.
locked into whatever style you're talking about. And I'm kind of like, well, did he need to live that whole life of like all those experiences and all that practice? Because he was kind of painting the whole time. But it's
Yeah.
really like the last 2 years where he's like, this is it. I figured it out. I got the aesthetic and I'll just burst it all like this massive explosion. And that's when we get all the fucking famous Van Gogh paintings. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
within like a 2 year period. Um, how important is it to people listening to go over like do we need to go over a general like history of Van Gogh? Do you think that would be useful? Do you think people will just listen?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that people know who Vincent Van Gogh is. But maybe I can just give it the quick Wikipedia that he was born in 1853, died in 1890, Dutch post-impressionist painter. Created approximately 2,100 artworks. People know him as the guy that cut his ear off, and that's about it, right? Like that's like the
Yep.
main thing that people know. He is the archetype of the tortured artist, but he's
Yep.
also like everywhere in the sense of like he created a vision that became the sort of like normative vision for art in a lot of ways. Like, do you remember when that like right when I finished this, that immersive Van Gogh exhibition opened?
Yeah, I went.
How was that? Because a lot of people were like kind of goofing on it.
I didn't love it.
Yeah.
I no, I thought it was really cheesy and this was before I got obsessed with Van Gogh. Yeah, I thought it was really cheesy. I think you're right about it's interesting. He is everywhere. He
Yeah.
is loved by toddlers and he's loved by like 90-year-olds.
Yeah.
And it's just incredibly fascinating. Um,
Because he was
there,
such like a person. Part of what's fascinating to me about reading the book is that he was personally a person that most people hated. Like with most people that met him, didn't like him, didn't believe that he was doing anything special with his art. Basically, told him to fuck off. He was a failure of a person in the sense of like having any kind of lasting relationships or social life. I mean, reading about this guy, he sounds like he's in our time we would see him as like a raving schizophrenic, like homeless person, and yet this guy also created art that connected to every human being. Like that part of it is weird to me. Like if he was such a social failure, how it was through his art only that he was able to connect.
I think that, and that is part of the like Van Gogh lore and mystery, right? And um, I was hitting on that today when I actually there's a giant Van Gogh exhibit in London here at the National Gallery where they brought in like 60 Van Gogh paintings from around the world. Um, and these are all from his last year, year and a half in Arles and
Mm-hmm.
in Saint Remy. Um, and so I've been twice already. So,
Yeah, you've been
I
you've been going to see Van Gogh. Like you've
yes,
been going
yeah,
to like this inspired you to actually go to museums.
yes, 100%. And I'm kind of obsessed. I spent like an hour there today. And
And you went to Arles as well, didn't you?
I did. I went to the town R where he lived, and this right here, I stood, right where he painted a lot of his most famous paintings.
Dear Lord, look at
Um,
that.
yeah. I mean, I just saw this. I just stood in front of this one today, the Starry Night over the Rhone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's it's incredible. And so what I was saying was I was kind of meditating on that what we were just talking about of that he was this deeply troubled person, but yet created all these lasting images loved by millions of people. And I think it's like this weird sense of hope. Like, how did he have this hope when his life was truly like despair and hated by everyone? Teenagers would in every town that he lived would ridicule him and like throw food at him
Ugh.
and like call him crazy and like everyone just hated him. But that yet instead of like getting up and even if he created art like creating this depressing art about whatever, no, he wanted people to be soothed by his art. He used those words like soothed. Um, he wanted people to be happy when they saw his art, like
Yeah.
explicitly saying that in all of his letters. It's just incredible.
It's how much do you think of his project as like a religious project? Because like he was very, I mean, at some point the guy goes to like, I mean, he thinks he's gonna be like a religious figure, right? He's like deeply Christian, he's deeply like engaged with God and all that. Because it seems like part of what he's doing is trying to show us like God on earth or something, if that makes sense.
I I think it's deeply religious, and that he even said so. I mean, I think he took that passion that he had. I mean, he was a fanatic. I think that's a good word to use.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and so anything he did, he was just a fanatic about. So he's like, no, I'm going to be a preacher because that's what my father was. And I want him to, be proud of me, always about the family and always about, these reconciliations with his family. So he's a preacher and he pours everything that he is into himself, into preaching. So then when he switched to painting, I think it was the same thing. He wanted to console people when he was a preacher, even though he was a fucking complete failure at it. He wanted to console people. Like he literally was like that was the period where he was like a bum.
yeah.
He was homeless. He
Hmm.
lived in a shack. He like ate rotten potatoes. Like he didn't wear shoes. And so when he switched to painting, he still wanted to do the same thing. He wanted to console people, but this time he wanted to do it through his art. So how he managed to still like believe in that after like despair after like just depression and psychosis and all that is beyond me. Like I don't understand.
I mean, he's driven by something that is like, I don't know, some sort of weird life force. But it's funny you mentioned like the no shoes and all that kind of shit because it seems key to the whole thing that he's kind of a grubby guy, like that he's not bourgeois, like he is sort of the he's of the streets and of the earth. And it seems like we talked about this, and it's weird territory to go into, but it's sort of like whatever we call homeless people or unhoused people, as the term is now. There is a certain there's a certain like economic element to that, and I think a lot of people are just economically unhoused, and that's that. But there's also, as you know, like kind of like the raving street person, and we've seen them like in. I mean, obviously, if you live in a city, you see that a lot. In New York, I think more than London. But like either
Yeah.
way, like that guy's around, like that kind of like feral person that's like not wearing shoes, doesn't give a fuck about like sleeping outside, will eat, yeah, bullshit. Like, and you're sort of like, that person trips me out because the rest of us like can't live like that. We're not comfortable that way. But some people clearly are just like, of, they're like, I don't know, they're closer to the street, the earth, the dirt, the grime, whatever it might be. And Van Gogh like came across to me as someone like that because I think that wasn't, as a kid, wouldn't he like go on these walkabouts and just go like sleep in the rain and be like freezing? And it was kind of like, what, like who has that? It's a very particular kind of orientation.
Yeah, I mean, he would walk for almost hundreds of miles, and just like till his feet were bleeding,
That's
and
right.
and since childhood,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, maybe it's just his connection with nature, like ever since he was a kid. That's probably the only thing that sort of brought him any peace. Um,
And
and so he
he
would,
sees nature in everything. Like, I don't know.
oh,
I'm
I
I'm
mean,
looking at the piece that I have on my wall, which is the one of the cafe with the like billiard table.
oh yeah,
Um,
I love that one.
yeah,
This one's incredible.
after I read the book, I was like, I have to have a Van Gogh on my wall, and I'd like to have a few more. And it's just it's just a cheesy print I got from Amazon. But
Right.
I'm looking at it now on my wall, and I'm kind of like thinking, okay, what is this doing? And it's like I mentioned psychedelic, but because in part Van Gogh touches on like psychedelic drug experiences for me, in the sense of being able to like have a vision that's a non-normal vision. You like all of a sudden like look at something and see something else in it. And it feels like what Van Gogh ultimately locked onto in the last 2 years of his life is that, like, just being able to effectively communicate what he was seeing. And like I look at this and I'm like, it's actually more real than real, if that makes sense.
Uh, I think it makes complete sense. I think he would sort of love to hear that. I would
Oh,
imagine.
I wish I could
Um,
talk to him. I was thinking that the whole time. I was just like, dude, I wish Vincent were here and I could just be like, we love you, Vincent. Like the whole world fucking loves you.
that was another big, just really interesting experience during all of this, was reading this novel of despair almost, right?
Hmm.
Like just things getting worse and worse for him on a personal level, and like marrying a prostitute, and like
Oh, that
not
sequence, yeah.
not being able to get anyone to sit for his portraits because just everyone hated him. Um, um, just thinking about all that. Um, oh shit,
Feeling like
where was I
bad for
going?
him. Um, I was going to ask you about Theo because that was a part of this that I didn't realize at all. That like Van Gogh, for people that don't know, Van Gogh has Vincent Van Gogh had a brother named Theo, and it kind of explains a lot about his art becoming public in some way because Theo was like an art dealer, right? in was it he was in
Yes,
and he was in this one of I don't know, was he in Paris? He was in one
he
of the
was in
cities.
Paris. No, he
Yeah.
was in Paris. Yeah.
So Theo was like, it's amazing how they were kind of both fucked up, but Theo was able to like navigate professional life better than him and like be in society. But that connection was important because it got Van Gogh thinking about painting.
Yeah, I mean, he was encouraged. I mean, he was basically encouraged to do anything that was just something normal, after being just a recluse and like a homeless guy
Hmm.
forever. But their relationship is interesting too. And I think this book, reason it's so amazing is that I think it paints the relationship in a different way. I think like if you read anywhere else or just the surface stuff, it's like Theo and Vincent, the brothers, always together, like they love each other, blah 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 blah. But like that's not true. Like yes, Vincent was incredibly difficult and it would be hard for anyone to put up with, but like Theo was kind of I read it as cruel to Vincent in a lot of ways, withholding. And even on his deathbed, he came to his like deathbed for like a few hours and he's like, oh, I gotta go back. Like I gotta go back to Paris,
But then he's
you know?
wrecked by guilt when Vincent
Yeah,
dies. Like just
because
destroyed.
of that,
Yeah, and
you
actually
know?
what loses his mind and goes and dies himself like a year later.
Yeah, because of syphilis.
Right.
He goes crazy. He's got that syphilis crazies.
These guys had a
Riddled.
lot of gross, diseased sex in their lives. They hung out with prostitutes all the time, both of them. Like this
Yes.
was their thing. Even though Theo, like, didn't Theo get married at some point and like had an actual life?
He did get married, and his wife is the one that's like almost personally responsible for Van Gogh's incredible success.
That's right. She's a key figure in the whole story.
Yeah, she's the one that like pushes it after both of their deaths and like, basically makes him, I mean, not single-handedly, like he was getting sort of noticed by other people, but yeah, she was almost solely responsible. It's like pretty incredible.
Remind me because I thought that this was something that like another part of the Van Gogh lore is that the guy died and essentially killed himself at the age of like 37, something
Yeah.
like that, and never knew that he was famous and that his art was appreciated. But it's not quite that. Like it seems like there were little things that happened. People were noticing what he was doing, and there were a few articles I think in like art
Yep.
magazines that were like, "This guy's doing some fucking crazy shit." Like he knew that people were noticing, like that he was doing something
Yes.
revolutionary. Yeah.
Yeah. It was about like for about 6 months before he died, he was like aware. But Theo, like, I don't think he shared the most um the best article, I think.
Mm.
Or one of them he didn't share with Vincent because it was during one of his sort of epileptic
Fits.
seizure fits. So
Yeah.
he like didn't tell him. So I don't think he knew about one particularly like important article about him. But I mean, for all intensive purposes, you know what I mean? He would have had no idea that it would become what it is now, like
But it,
no idea.
he kind of, but I think that's part of the why I feel so bad that I want to like dig him up and reanimate his corpse so I can tell him that like he's so famous because
Yeah,
he's
there's
so
a scene that does that.
is that really?
In a Doctor Who show.
Oh Jesus. Are you fucking serious?
You should
Dude,
watch it. It's on YouTube. It's
that's weird. I mean, I watched
yeah.
I watched the Willem Dafoe Van Gogh movie. Did you watch
Yeah,
that?
I still can't bring myself to watch any of these movies,
It's
but I
directed
will at
by
some point.
Julian Schnabel, who also made the Pollock movie, which is sort of interesting.
Oh, that's
That
really interesting.
I think Schnabel made the Pollock movie, but either way, he's like a painter, and Yeah, I understand. Like watching Defoe play Van Gogh is sort of like I never didn't think it was Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. He's like,
I love Willem Dafoe, but
of
he
course,
wasn't
don't get me wrong.
he didn't quite capture what I felt like in the book. And I was trying to think like what made Van Gogh like just to get back to the fame thing because he sought fame. Like he did want everyone to appreciate his art. Like he wasn't just a
Yes,
guy that was like, "Oh, I just like I want to toil in anonymity and just do my thing." He desperately wanted to connect with people. I think that's part of the tragedy is he's like
yes.
trying to reach out to people all the time and everyone's like, "Fuck you, freak." And you're like, "Dude, that hurts."
Well, it's interesting that you touched on that idea of connection because I think that's the key. At least to me, like I was to make it a little personal, like just really trying to figure out why I can like what became so obsessed with him, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I think it's this idea of connection, and all of us, right, are looking for that
Hmm.
in any number of ways. But a connection with another human, and um the combination of like this book, like getting to know him and his life in a very vivid sense, combined with like his work, which is basically like his mind onto canvas, right? Like
Yeah.
it's being able to see another human's mind. So like those two in combination, like you really feel like you're connected with this human being, which is like a really, I don't know, unique experience. And I maybe have not like had that before. And I don't think it would be possible without reading this book, you
Mm.
know, and
Hmm.
getting to know him. And I think again, like going back a little bit to the art history aspect, like that's what made him unique. He like turned the tide of like art being about the author and like about the artist, not the art. You know, it was
Right. Right.
before it was all just like the image itself, you know, whoever made it wasn't really important. And Van Gogh sees the that transition into more like personal, like the artist matters. And that was interesting to me because as you know, we've had many conversations like is the author is dead, right? Like that idea
Yes.
is like is the
Yep.
author dead? And I think for a while I subscribed to that, you
Yeah.
know,
Sure.
especially with film. But I don't know. I think now maybe that's why I became so obsessed. I think I'm sort of understanding that maybe I was wrong, and
Well, it can be both. The author could
maybe
be,
it can be both.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think that sometimes it makes sense to like remove the author and see that, um, I don't know, see the work on its own terms in some ways and
Yeah.
see the author. Like that's the whole Radiohead idea, like of that the artist is just sort of like the receiver for like whatever vision is like collective and giving it to us. I can see it
Yes,
that
that's
way.
true. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's really key because I've read a lot of biographies of different people over the years and had deep, like, I don't know, appreciation and even like intellectual sort of stimulation from thinking about these figures of the past. But with Van Gogh, I never I like it's weird and almost uncomfortable to say, but I felt the desire to like touch him, to know him. I felt the desire to be in the room with him. I wanted to hug him, hold him. There was like a love that was there. And I think that, you know, whatever style he created, it's like that aesthetic is like he's reaching out with like beauty and love as like the connective tissue to the other person. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of warmth to his paintings. His paintings aren't like David Lynch's paintings. You know, like you've seen them. It's just like a woman, like a woman, like with her arms cut off, with like blood pouring out of her mouth, and it just says, you know, "Eat my fear" or something like that. And you're like, Jesus Christ, and it definitely moves me. Like it's fucking disgusting, but I'm
But
not like, oh, like with Van Gogh. Like, yeah, you're showing me these paintings right now, Peter. That they're so warm, they're so inviting, they're so like there's something so humble and beautiful about them, that they feel like they are a person reaching out to you. You know, like he created almost a visual language to be like, this is what the best of humanity could be, is this love that I'm expressing visually. I don't know.
I 100% agree. And standing in front of one like in person is even one step uh, more than just seeing it in a picture. Like there's nothing like it. It's incredible. Like you feel all of that. You literally do. But yeah, like creating these warm images and these just like you were saying, visual language versus like the David Lynch or something like that. Like this almost seems like more daring and more ballsy in a way, like more like despite all like the awfulness of life,
Hmm.
there's
Right,
this.
right. Like he's
You
like
know what I
reminding
mean?
himself and reminding humanity.
Right. Like how easy would it be to yeah, be like you draw like a someone getting his head cut off and it says fuck or
Yes.
something, you know,
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
like I'm sad. Like I don't know, this it seems heroic in a way, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
I mean, it's
aspiring.
Van Gogh is like simply saying to us from more than a century ago, like, look at these fucking flowers. Like, look at this piece of fruit, you know? And I think it's really amazing that, like, and this was another sequence that was very memorable. It is in Arles, right? That, like, Gauguin comes to him.
Gauguin, yeah.
Gauguin. I don't know how to pronounce this shit.
Yeah, Gauguin.
Gauguin comes to him, this artist who's kind of more established, whose name
Who
isn't
d
as known, honestly.
yeah, and doesn't want to come.
Right. And he's like, I don't want to go hang out with this fucking loser. And he goes and he like makes fun of him for his sunflowers. He's like, yeah, nice sunflower paintings. When are you gonna stop painting fucking sunflowers? And you're like, dude, those sunflower paintings, first of all, Gauguin, you asshole. Those sunflower paintings are gonna be worth more than anything you ever fucking produce. But besides that, it's like he didn't get. And that's what's crazy to me, is that like artists, people who are, and maybe it's because there were other artists and they were competitive and they were blind to this, but they didn't see what he was doing. Like they didn't see what we see. Like we look at these sunflowers and we're like, Jesus, dude, he's able to like take just a literal pot of sunflowers and give it to us in a way that just makes it feel like this is the most important thing in the whole world, is this bit of sunflowers. And yeah, people like Gauguin and many others were like, that's bullshit. Like, whatever that is bullshit. And that is amazing. Like, unappreciated in his time, I know, is the kind of cliche about Van Gogh, but it is kind of insane that no one saw what everyone else was going to see very easily 100 years
Yeah,
later. Yeah.
yeah. And again, to put a little additional info on that, like these guys in this book make that whole sequence of, you know, Gauguin like coming and shitting out his sunflowers
Yeah.
so much more nuance. And like I see everywhere now when I look, like the story of Gauguin and Van Gogh, and a lot of people brush over like the real story, like, oh, it didn't quite work out, but they painted some marvelous paintings together. And it's like the real story is much like harsher and darker and weirder, and you know, this just insane person basically ranting and raving, and Gauguin just treating him like shit. And just it's incredible, like the real story makes it even more, um it makes me appreciate it even more, you
Yeah,
know.
I agree. I mean, I was fascinated by this book, and kind of couldn't stop thinking about it, honestly, for a long time. There's like lots of books you read. Like I read a lot of nonfiction that I just kind of forget about. But this book I read a couple years ago, and it sort of like became a part of me in a way that most books do not. And again, I mean, I think it is, you know, partly the authors, but it's partly just like unlocking my knowledge of Van Gogh. Like I'd never really known that level of his story and that kind of connection to who he actually was. Like he he would have been annoying. Like he was someone who was like he was
Yes.
angry. Like he was an angry fucking dude. That's what's sort of incredible too. Is like ultimately you're looking at the work of an angry syphilitic alcoholic who fucking hated everybody as much as they hated him. Like there was a part of him that was like, fuck the whole world. And yet he ached for like love and beauty and connection. And like that's the part of it, like those twin things that sort of drive the whole story for me. But yeah, I
And
was,
so relatable, like
yeah,
that story, like I'm like, that sounds like me, like that. I'm sure that's such a core human experience,
yeah. I mean, I remember it's in the Dave Eggers book, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius. I read it in the 90s. I still remember this part of it where he said that like whenever I'm driving and I see like a crowd of people like at the beach, like next to the road where I'm driving in San Francisco, I have like the twin impulses happening at the same time where I want to stop the car and get out and like play music and dance with them and just love them all. And the other part of me wants to like push my foot on the accelerator and run them all over. and, I'm, and I'm like, yeah, like that part of it is something that Van Gogh was able to communicate to us as well. But
Wow.
he did it in a way that was like, I don't know, just the desire for transcendence.
Connection
Yeah,
and
transcendence. Yeah,
transcendence.
right.
Yeah.
He didn't make a lot. I mean, did Van Gogh make any disturbing paintings?
Oh, yes.
He
And
did.
they're kind of amazing. I'll bring one up. Like
Yeah,
they're mostly sketches.
right.
Um, do
Oh,
you
those
remember the
early
one?
ones with the early ones where he was like sketching like what the potato eaters and
The potato eaters.
yeah,
He had a long, not long because his whole career was 10 years, but he had a period where he only wanted to paint in like grays and blacks and whites.
right.
And if you remember that, he would argue with Theo like, I'm never going to use color. That's like, the Impressionists did that, so I'm not going to do that. So he fought color for a long time,
That's right.
which is crazy.
Yeah, it's ironic
Um,
because like when you think of Van Gogh, like color is maybe the number one thing that stands out.
do
Oh
you
yeah,
remember
look at
this?
these. Yeah. Despair and sorrow. So yeah, these are images of
This
women
was
and men that are just sort of hunched over in despair. Wow.
Sien or Sin or however you pronounce it, the prostitute.
Wow.
She was that he married or no, wanted to marry and lived with for about a year. And she's like 7 months pregnant here. But this one in particular, like I was really struck me. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Um,
that is disturbing and that's definitely not like reaching out for like the beauty of the world. Yeah, that's another one. Wow. Looks like he does want to show people that are feeling shitty.
yeah,
This one's called
yeah.
Old Man in Sorrow. Yeah.
But it's rare. I mean, it truly is. Like it's mostly these incredibly beautiful, paintings of the um asylum that he was in San Remy and like the surrounding areas. Like in between sometimes months of losing time. Like he would just lose time for the entire time that he was having these fits. So can you imagine just like you're literally an insane person, you wake up and you go out and paint this,
Ugh.
you know?
Yeah, right.
Like what the fuck?
I
It's
know because yeah, it reminds me of like yeah, like how do you have this like just the skill, like just the technical skill
yeah.
to pull something off like that because your mind is not really there in the same way that a normative mind is. He's super fucked up and he's drunk like all the time.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
mean, I don't know how many of these paintings were done while he was like literally intoxicated. In some ways, it doesn't even matter because it's kind of like his mind was always twisted. Like
Yeah,
these are the products of twisted minds.
yeah, oh, for sure. I feel like the authors don't get into the booze that much. You know what I mean? So it either actually wasn't much of contributing factor, or I don't know, or they like just didn't want to get into it.
He
But
loved to drink and smoke. I mean, he's always just obsessed with smoking, like tobacco, right? Like he's got like a
yeah, his
pipe full
pipe.
of tobacco constantly. I mean, he's just, I mean, it
Well,
makes
you would
sense. I don't
you
know if
would
he's
not.
self-medicating. I don't know if it makes sense to like if psychoanalyze that.
Well, I mean, how many people have tried to psychoanalyze Van Gogh after he died, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Like there's a million different diagnoses of what he had, and all that.
I
It's
forget, do they
pretty
actually
wild.
say some like they kind of do touch a little on that, right? They're like, we think he was
The
psychotic or something.
Yeah, I listened to some interviews too with these two, and they come pretty firmly on epilepsy. It's called like frontal lobe epilepsy or something like that.
Wow.
Because that was like the initial doctor's diagnosis, and like just it's very common, or all the symptoms are the same. So that's what they think he had. So he just, would have these epileptic fits where he would just not be himself, basically. He
Hmm.
was just like a wild animal. They would have to like tie him to the bed.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's really awful, that
I can't
element of it.
imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, I just saw. And speaking of David Lynch, I mean, I just saw like a little interview with him where he was saying that he really resents the whole idea of the tortured artist and that you need to be like crazy,
Yes, I
alcoholic,
saw
drug
this.
addict. And he's like, because he's like, even Van Gogh. He's like, Van Gogh, do you think he fucking was miserable when he was painting? He liked to paint. Like that was his therapy. That was his like he did it all the time. It was a practice for him. This was not like a product of him just like being tortured. The tortured part of it is sort of just like an adjunct to his experience in some ways. Like, I mean, the other part of me is like, yeah, there was like I mean, there are a million crazy alcoholics in the world, right? But they're not
Yeah,
all like they don't all have an art practice like this. Like this guy was driven to work.
driven,
Yeah.
driven to work. Yeah, it's
Like I can't work like this guy, and I don't have the problems that he has. You know what I mean? Like I've never been able to develop an artistic practice. Not that I want to be a painter, but I'm kind of like it's sort of amazing how much of a hustler and grinder he actually was, for being like such a fucked up dude. He produced a lot. He did a lot.
he
2,100
did
paintings, dude. That's a lot.
2,100 paintings in basically 2 years. He had some before, but most of them were in those 2 years. Oh yeah, no, there's part of this too where I look at him and I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah. Totally.
It's funny, like just even today, like strolled up to one of them and got close, and it was just so breathtaking. It was so beautiful. I was just like, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Like,
talent it's talent and grace and whatever it is on a level that we're still like the world is still coming to terms with. Like that part of it, I mean, as silly as the immersive Van Gogh bullshit thing was, where they basically made
yeah,
3D screensavers out of him, it tells you that like we're still coming to terms with this guy. Like we're not done looking at these paintings. And that part of it is pretty nuts. I mean,
I
if
should
we
send you a
yeah,
video. I should send you, I meant to share it before this, but like the amount of people that were at this exhibition.
yeah.
It just incredible.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I'll still
People
remember
are still baffled.
this isn't Van Gogh, but when I went to the Louvre a couple years ago, like there were just when you go in the Louvre, there are just signs that say the Mona Lisa is this way. Like this place is filled with all the art of the entire fucking world, but there's signs everywhere, and everyone is like running in that direction, like they're going to go see like the Beatles or something there, and like you get in this room, and like it's just packed with people with their phones out, and this tiny little painting in the corner under like miles of glass is the Mona Lisa, And it's sort of like, what is that? Like, can that have anything to do with the painting? Like, what is the power of that? And I feel like Van
Yeah.
Gogh has that power as well. Like, people are just drawn to it.
No, I know. And I think that's I was struggling with that a little bit. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm super obsessed with Van Gogh. Like how fucking cliche.
It's like,
You know
yeah,
what I
welcome
mean?
to your 40s, Peter.
Yeah.
Now I like Van Gogh and I read boring art books about him.
Like, oh, I'm being like dead serious, you know? Um, like, like, why him? But I don't know.
Why him? That's a good question because
I think,
there are a million artists, right? Like,
yeah,
and there are a million like great artists and all that shit, like the Monet, the Impressionists, the stuff that Van Gogh was sort of kind of rejecting but building off of at the same time. That's compelling art to me too. They're really beautiful, but
yeah,
something about I don't know, something about Van Gogh. I'm trying to think because that you mentioned that at the beginning, and I think it's probably laid out in more detail, and I'm just forgetting from the book. But that that aesthetic shift from the Impressionists to whatever Van Gogh was doing, from like a
yeah,
Monet painting of a field with flowers versus a Van Gogh painting of a field with flowers,
yeah.
they are so different. There's a signature in the Van Goghs that's so um I don't know. you know you struggle. It's some of this stuff is like you can't put it in words because
Yeah.
it's the paintings themselves. But if I were
But I
trying to,
think
yeah, go ahead.
I think part of it also just is like you were saying, you know, this shift from what people were before him were doing to what he did. Um, represents a radical shift. And I think, and I know we've known each other for a long time. We like radical shifts
Yeah,
and thinking and things that turn ideas upside down and create new, whether that's, you know, literature, politics, you know,
hmm
psychedelics, you know, the 60s and all it encompasses all of that. And
totally.
I think he represented that in one individual, you know, and it's also and packaged in this amazing story, you know.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. It makes sense, you know.
So what about the ear thing? Because that's what everyone talks about, and I was like, even the rendering of that was the way they talked about him like having a razor and like looking at the mirror and like doing this was actually heartbreaking reading it. Like it actually like by the time it's so funny because like I grew up with kind of jokes about Van Gogh's the guy that cut his ear off. Like he must be a crazy person. But like when I
Yeah.
actually got to that point in the book, I was like it was just emotionally sort of overwhelming to think of him hurting himself because you're just like, I had that love for him. Like I felt protective of him. And I'm like, dude, here he is just slicing himself up. It's so fucked up. Like he hated
You're
himself.
he uh, and I mean all he was looking for was connection. You know, he wanted this utopian art colony where all these artists come and all he wanted was like connection, connection. And Gauguin just fucking shit all over him like at every possible moment. And he had one of his episodes and or at least maybe a partial one or whatever. I forget how they kind of paint that, but cuts his own fucking ear off and then hands it to a prostitute at the local brothel, you
Ugh,
know? I
God.
mean, it devastating. And I think you're right. I think the verse just ha, Van Gogh is the one that cut his ear off versus the real kind of story and reading into this book. Like it's heartbreaking, you know?
Yeah, he should have cut his dick off actually because that got
It's
him
not
into
like
a
he
lot
was
of
using,
trouble.
yeah, he wasn't using it except for,
Right.
you know,
Getting syphilis.
with the prostitutes.
God, I mean, I mean, it's so easy to for Van Gogh to be sort of I don't know, like you said, it's like in a lot of ways it's like the ultimate mainstream thing. Like, oh, Starry Night, like There, people have it on tote bags, their
Yeah.
refrigerator magnets. Like he's an industry, like an entire fucking industry. And yet at the same time, like reading this book, you're kind of like, dude, like the guy that produced this industry, the guy that produced this vision that for whatever reason people are still deeply drawn to and want to like decorate their lives with was a guy who like struggled immensely to have any kind of relationship with anybody else at all. Like everyone rejected him. I was so pissed at his family like the whole time.
Yes.
Like
Yes. Yeah. That's what I was
even
saying
after he
earlier.
died,
Yeah.
right? Like they were still like they were like, yeah, who cares? He's dead.
Yeah, his mom was like, his mom, there's a quote I think from his mom after he died of like, just like, yeah, he was always a disappointment. Well, like, so it wasn't that, but it was something equally bad. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Like, I touched on it earlier, but that's what really differentiated the like kind of myth and the reality of like, I was pissed at his fucking family.
Yeah.
Like, no sympathy for somebody who clearly was struggling and
They were
no care, just
embarrassed
like
of him.
embarrassed. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were embarrassed. And ultimately it created so much shame in him, and all he wanted was reconciliation with it from his family. And they do such a good job of painting that, like every visit home, like every Christmas, like he had this idealized version of his in his head of like
That's
how
right.
it would go, and his family finally like welcoming them, him in with open arms, and it never happening, never, ever, ever.
Like
And like,
that's key, right? That
yeah,
he's longing to
yes,
go home for Christmas. That's very identifiable, right? Like
yeah,
and you know, you talk you like sort of imbue Christmas with this sort of nostalgia and this perfection of what family can be. To me, Christmas has always been an enormous stress in part because of the pressure of like that. Like we're going to create a perfect family moment with the
yeah,
tree and the kids and the presents and everything's going to be just right and we're going to actually live forever in this Christmas. He wanted that so badly. And
yeah,
yet like his family was like don't even come, dude. Like we don't even like you around.
completely rejected. And then even with Theo, like he always harkened back to this, I can't pronounce it, but it was this canal in um where they lived, or where they would go on a walk on walks, and there was this one particular walk down this canal in where they grew up, and this one particular walk where they talked for hours, and
Yeah, right.
had this real connection.
Is this like they
And
would
he would,
walk and like they would stop and get milk from people at like
I think
farms and
so.
shit like that? Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, sure, yeah,
Yeah,
something like that.
it's a crazy vision. It's a vision of them like
Yeah,
walking through nature of Europe in this era,
yeah,
and you're like, can you fucking imagine what it was
no,
like to walk through 19th century Europe like this? I mean, different
yeah.
world. Yeah,
Yeah, and of course they paint such a great picture of it. Um, but yeah, this one particular walk where they again had this real connection and never really did afterwards. And so he's constantly mentioning it in letters to Theo, like harkening back to the canal walk,
mm.
and never getting it. Theo always keeping his distance, like never visiting, even though he could,
It's
whenever
like
he wanted
it's
to.
like Vincent is like texting Theo, being
Yeah.
like, "Man, like I know it's been a long time, but like I just wanted to say, like this walk we took this one time was like the so important to me. I still think about the talk we had, the vision we had. That walk is my whole life." And Theo responding by being like, "LOL," or like, "That's crazy," or like just putting a
Yeah,
thumbs
like
up on the
wow.
text. Yeah,
Yeah. When was that again?
yeah. Thanks a lot, Theo.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
But
This, yeah. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say that like it's still I still get mad at their relationship, and like thinking about Theo like this. I guess it's really
He was
hard
embarrassed by
because
him too, dude.
he was embarrassed by him too, like constantly. And he, out of guilt, he supported him and all of that. But like, eh, he was just never there for him, never showing, never really giving any of the like kind of emotional needs, that Vincent needed. And it's really hard because like he must have been insanely hard to be around. So like it, I fight that, but like I'm on his side and I can't help it.
Well,
You know what I
because
mean? Like,
dude, I mean, Vincent Van Gogh was ultimately a judgmental prick. Like he came off that way, right? He
yeah.
would be like,
Oh yeah,
"Oh, you're
very
doing art that's."
opinionated.
He'd be like, "You're doing art that's fucking stupid. That's not fucking art. Everything you do is a fail." Like he was just really
Yes.
so fucking opinionated that I was
Yeah.
like, I feel like this. I know this personality. Like if this guy were in my class, like my art class, I'd be like, "Shut the fuck up, dude." Like,
Yeah, that's
why do
true.
you think that you figured everything out when you're a fucking drunk idiot? Like that it makes sense in some ways that he was
Yeah.
rejected. Like not
Yes.
they didn't know what we know. And he also like only did that really, really great shit in the last 2 years. So like for
Right.
most of his life, he was just kind of a failure that was just kind of like, yeah, you dude, why do you think you have it all figured out? He definitely
Well,
thought he had it all figured out,
he
which is kind of
did.
ironic.
Well, I just had this thought, like, think about it for a second, though. Like, because he, he got fired from job after job of like at art dealerships, that his family connections would get him. He would get fired by being like too opinionated.
But
And
bullshit. He's like, this is bullshit. This is
yeah, feel
bullshit.
like
Yeah.
being like an asshole to people, right? So imagine like he just didn't have that in him that I think unfortunately most of us do, which can be just like, yes, yes, sir, yeah, whatever you need, like being able to fit into it to keep a job, right? To like
Yeah.
play the
To
society,
lie
to
and
lie,
perform. Yeah.
perform, to
Yep.
play that societal role. And like he just didn't have that ability. But if he did have that ability, he would have been Theo. He would have like kept getting jobs in the art world and just, well, I got to make a living, been Joe Schmo like the rest of us.
Yeah.
So if he didn't have that sort of impulse, he would
He
have
kept
never
it
done any.
real. Van Gogh
Yeah.
kept it real. He really did though. Like, and you're sitting here being like,
Yeah.
oh, he's like sitting here, like he was always saying, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's not how it should be. Your art's stupid. My art is right. But he's like, he was kind of correct in some like ultimately he's like, yeah, you want to come like always wanted to jump into those scenes as like a time traveler and be like, Vincent's right. You guys are stupid. You're missing the greatest artist in the world. Like, it's so fucking frustrating.
One of his paintings just sold for $90 million.
They don't even know that like that number exists yet.
Yeah, they've never even heard that number before. They're like, you're fucking full of shit.
You know
But
what?
I mean,
Yeah.
he also really wanted to be not earlier said he wanted to be successful. He wanted to also be just commercially successful. He was obsessed with like paying Theo back and like making a living. Like all he really wanted to
Money was a
do,
big issue in his
money.
life. Yep.
Yeah, money was a huge issue. And most of his letters were like either asking for more money or like where's the money or it's pretty incredible. So like that's another
And
huge
that
factor.
and he only sold one painting in his lifetime.
Yeah,
The Red Vineyard I'm seeing
the Red
now.
Vineyard. Yeah. But like you were saying at the very top, like he was, getting noticed. And I think his art can, from the day he died, just kind of just went up and up and up and up, right? Like
Well,
it's
I mean,
crazy.
it makes you wonder like how many other Van Goghs there have been in the world that like for whatever reason didn't get like because it was ultimately Theo Van Gogh and his wife that shepherded the art into the world like that
Yes.
because listen to this dude like there's this my Claudia's father uh Sal he's been composing all his life. He's a composer but like just on his own. He has like tons of like operas and symphonies and all this crazy classical music that he just has like written in files that he
That's
hasn't shown
wild.
anybody. But like
Wow.
he also is this friends with this guy named Joe Greenberg, who was a painter on the Lower East Side. He had a studio on the Lower East Side for like 40 years. He painted stuff that looked kind of Van Gogh-ish. We have a couple of them, including one of Amsterdam that he did, like a painting of the canals of Amsterdam. it's a beautiful, like they're really key paintings. They're like really,
Wow.
they're really good. So anyway, Joe like sort of lived in anonymity on the Lower East Side at his studio. He had like, I don't know, 1,000 pieces of paintings in there. He lived to his 90s. He died a couple years ago. And when he died, his family, his daughters, who were like estranged from him and like kind of hated him because he was also a difficult person and made their lives difficult, they just came to his studio one day and just took all the paintings and threw them in a dumpster. And like they were taken to the dump. Like the entirety of his life production. And they said, fuck you. Basically, their attitude was, we don't care. Like he ruined our lives with his stupid paintings and we don't give a shit. So like
Holy shit.
Claudia and I have like two or three, and Claudia's sisters have a couple Joe Greenbergs, and then Sal has a few of them. And we're, I think, basically the only people that have these paintings. And they look like Van Gogh, like it's in that style. Um,
Wow, that's
but
incredible.
yeah, but it reminded me of Van Gogh. Like they could have just easily happened to him, where like they just took all those paintings and threw them in the trash because it's like just the product of a stupid person we don't like.
Yeah, that's why Theo's wife, Jo,
Yeah.
um is it's such a key to all of this. Like she could have easily been like pissed, because like Vincent was not like nice to her or particularly kind, and obviously was a huge stress in Theo's life.
Hmm.
She could have been like, fuck you, and then just like burned them all,
Well, his family's attitude was certainly that. Like they didn't see any value or worth in his paintings.
Yeah. No, his sisters, and definitely is not his mom. Like, it's just
What's crazy is
painful,
I think
painful.
isn't it in the book that like his family, like Van Gogh may have killed himself at the age of 37, but his family, like they keep living and they actually they see Van Gogh become like a major art figure. Like,
Yes, yeah, I
and it's
think
kind of like,
so.
how do you feel about that, you assholes? Like,
Yeah.
did you ever be like, oh, now we get it? Or were they just kind of like, I don't see, they never saw value in him.
I mean,
It's so shitty.
this the sad truth is probably like, I mean, it was 125 years ago. Like, I don't think they would even be able to think those thoughts even, of
Yeah.
like, maybe I should have been kinder to him. It was just like, what? We did all we can. We gave him money. Like they're just like not even thinking in terms of, I don't know, being supportive or foster or helping someone who was clearly mentally ill. They wouldn't have even known what those words meant.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, it does, the whole thing does make you think a lot about like art and artist and authorship and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I think that's why David Lynch wanted to be like, look, like quit romanticizing this bullshit. Like Van Gogh could have been more supported in his life and could have still produced that art. Like he could have had a better life. Like he didn't need to be tortured in order to produce that stuff. And in fact, the tortured element of it like kept him in a lot of ways from being successful as an artist. Or I don't know, like the it's to me, I think a lot about that Joe Greenberg thing, but there's probably a lot of people like that their family's like, yeah, fuck your art and fuck you because you're a
Yeah.
bad person and we don't
Or
like,
like,
yeah.
or just even have the potential to be something like Van Gogh or something like any creative person that contributes to this story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but oh, where I lost myself.
Yeah, that's all right. It's you're 8 hours later than we are. So what's it? It's almost 11 p.m. It's so
It's
bizarre.
almost 11 p.m. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like I might as well be on another planet.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
Isn't it crazy that you
Um,
could create the greatest art in the world, but people hate you? And like it could be lost. It could have been lost. Like Van Gogh's shit could have been completely lost to us.
completely lost. Luckily, I think a lot of them were kind of given away early, so like there was a lot of people that had them in private collections or whatever. But I mean, talking about private collections and shit like that, like what do you think? like the art world surrounding Van Gogh and the money and the like politics of all of that, does that affect like how you see Van Gogh at all? Like, does that, because there is a huge critique about, right, the art world
Oh
and
yeah.
how what is art, and it's like all whoever has the most backing and money and galleries and that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
it's a hard,
it is. And obviously these things have value in part because there's just there it's like that Benjamin aura thing, right? There's only so many Van Gogh like objects in the world. It's partly why you're drawn to going to museums and seeing the actual thing rather than like the scan that's on like Wikipedia that I'm looking at right now because you
yeah,
want to like that magic. And like the fact I don't know, part of me is like, yeah, it's gross that like it's a screensaver exhibit and people just make so much fucking money off of Van Gogh and he
yeah,
died in poverty. Um but the other part of me is like, well, it's the ultimate vindication of Van Gogh. Like the fact that people in this day will pay $90 million to have this thing
yeah,
and fuck the guy that's doing that. But at the same time, like it's just it tells me that Van Gogh is that powerful. Like that whatever his art is that powerful. Like that part of it to me is what makes it so intriguing is sort of like why is it still like why is it still so valuable? Why does it still have an industry? Why can you create an immersive Van Gogh exhibit, as stupid as it was in LA, but like there were fucking lines around the block of like
oh yeah,
young people who were like, I want to
yeah,
go like get stoned and like walk around the Van Gogh like immersive
yeah.
exhibit, like because there's some feeling that it gives you that I don't think most people in that line could necessarily articulate. I mean, even you and I in this hour together can't really articulate, but there's something truly like compelling about the art that just keeps going. It's crazy.
And you can have that kind of personal relationship with it,
Yeah.
despite
Yeah.
the like,
How huge it is.
yeah, and the money aspect and the gallery aspect and the class aspect and all of that. Like, at least I think can separate that, but it's interesting. Like, you can have this, I feel like, at least, that I have this personal relationship like
Yeah.
with the art and
Uh-huh.
with Vincent, which is like
Weird.
bizarre. And I
Mhm.
don't think I've ever sort of experienced that before, you
Yeah,
know?
I know. And I really I love a lot of artists, musicians, filmmakers. I'm obsessed with several figures, I would say, in my life, but Van Gogh has a kind of I don't know, whenever I think of him, I think like there's a sentimentality to it. Like I'm just
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, Vincent. Like I love Neil Young, right? Like I'm obsessed with Neil Young. I feel very connected to him in a million ways, but I don't go like, oh, Neil. Like I don't have that like same sentimental quality. Almost, it's weird because it's almost like a protective quality. Like I want to protect and defend Vincent. Like, and it's like he doesn't need he's dead, first of all.
You want to give him a hug.
Yeah,
Like, I want to give him a hug. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Yeah.
totally.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my God, that's so weird. So we got to go, but what I wanted you to tell me really quickly, like your trip to Arles. Did you see the like the yellow house and all that, like the sort of where
I
he
did.
painted? What was it like to be there?
Um, so I had gotten to I'd gotten to the so this is, sorry, we can post some of these, but this is like where it is. It's hard to tell. Can you see this?
No, you're not screen
Oh, oh,
sharing.
sorry.
Share the damn screen. Okay, there I see it.
Um,
Oh yeah, you texted me this picture.
Wait, can you see it now?
Yeah, I had seen it. I was seeing it, and then you took it away.
Can you see it?
Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that's where like the Starry Night over the Rune. Uh,
No way. Look at that.
yeah, it's it's crazy.
It doesn't look anything like the painting.
No, of course not. That's like where the yellow house. Anyway, I had gotten here um just on a family trip, and I hadn't gotten in the book. He had just arrived here. He had just arrived in Arles, which was like I was a little disappointed about. Because like he hadn't cut off his ear yet. But
Hmm.
it was incredible. I mean, like being able to view where he lived and where he painted, like most of the most famous paintings were all here in Arles,
Are they
is
like
just
did they pimp out the town with like Van Gogh shit?
only a little bit, which is surprising. There's like some plaques. Like it's an old city. It's like it's ancient. It's an ancient Roman city. There's a Colosseum.
Look at that.
Um,
Wow. I had no
there's a
idea.
co
In my mind, it was just kind of like a tiny little French village,
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
but it's
But
got
it's like,
weird stone Roman structures to it.
yeah, it's
It's
an
funny as you're
amphitheater.
clicking through these pictures, I'm recognizing paintings.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that one like alley cafe restaurant, like
Oh no,
that's a
wait,
famous one.
that's coming up.
That's Night Cafe.
Yeah, which oh, this is the hospital.
No way.
Yeah.
How
So
much did your kids love the Van Gogh stuff?
they're into it now just because like they don't, they don't have a choice. That's the
They
cafe.
don't
That's
have a choice.
They don't have a choice.
You will appreciate Vincent Van Gogh, but kids do. Like that's the thing. Is like
Yeah, oh, no,
kids.
they're super into it. Yeah, this is the night cafe. But yeah, it's like this amazing little town, and just like walking through it and seeing all of it was incredible. Like I want to go back, but I think that adds another like
Wow.
element to my obsession, right? Is like
Well, you're in Europe. Yeah.
being in Europe and like being able to go to these places and like actually seeing so many of his actual paintings. Um, uh, it's just incredible, you know.
It's part of the I
It's
don't know.
part of the allure, you
Yeah,
know.
like you're close to where he actually did this. I mean, it's funny because
Yeah.
it's like that was part of like our I think for me and I think probably for you too of like our attraction in New York City
Yes, the
in
beats.
part yeah, was in part like to be in the streets with the people that we admired as artists and writers and things like that. I mean,
Oh,
do you
that's
remember that
interesting. Yeah.
do you remember that Speed Levitch film, The Cruise? How much we
Abso-fucking-lutely. Yeah.
how much did we love that? Like and he's like a Van Gogh type figure, right? And I don't mean that like he's a great artist. I mean he was
Right.
kind of crazy and like he had a vision of like New York City that I was like, dude, I see what like the same thing he's like. He's like these. He would talk about like the monuments of the buildings and how what magic was in them, and I was like, not everybody sees that. Like, not everybody
Yeah.
looks at a big fucking building in the village and says, that this is like a work of poetry, you know.
Yeah.
But I like
Yeah.
this guy did, and like I feel like Van Gogh is on that level too, where he was like he's almost like the ultimate stoner in some way. Because he's like, do you see? You ever really looked at a building? Have you ever really looked at a sunflower? Like, look at what I
Who
see. Yeah.
who else would you put in that category?
God, that's a good question. I mean, Jackson Pollock, weirdly
Yeah.
enough, right? And Jackson Pollock
Pollock.
he didn't fucking paint anything, but just a bunch of like splatters on the that's what's amazing is it can come
Yeah.
down like it's like it abstracts to the point where it's no longer a recognizable figure. And like
Yeah.
I'm not, the like post impression, the abstract impressionist, the like Rothko, where it's just like a pic, it's
Just
just a
solid colors.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like a solid red
I don't like
square.
that.
Yeah, I can get into it intellectually. It doesn't move me. Like a Jackson
That's a
Pollock
good
can make you
that's a good
cry.
way. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I always say I'm glad it exists.
Sure.
I don't want it to not exist. It doesn't, doesn't tickle me.
You're kind of like, yeah, yeah, I get it. It's just a fucking blank square.
Yeah. Like, okay.
I
Yeah, it's
I
a
do hate the
comment.
people. I do hate the people that are like, oh, anyone could do that because it's sort of like,
That's
eh,
dumb too. Yeah, that's
yeah.
dumb too.
I saw this guy that did that work. He worked at a museum And he's like, whenever we do the abstract and expression shit and like stuff like Rothko, it's like there's always just a guy who's like, I could have done that. And he's like, I wish that every time that happened, like the ceiling would open up and a whole bunch of art supplies would drop down on the floor with a big sign that says, "Do it then, shithead."
Did you ever see the Menu?
No. What
It's
is that? A
there.
movie?
Yeah, where they go to this pretentious like chef, and it's like on an island, but it ends up there's a twist at the end, but yeah, essentially the he's sort of getting back at all of these customers, and one guy's a real foodie, and he's like a know-it-all, and the chef is like, okay, come into my kitchen, show me, like
Yeah. Yeah.
cook something, and he of course he can't, and it's
Right.
like this whole dramatic scene. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, because not everyone can do it. And like
No.
what I mean to me, like that's a key part of the Van Gogh thing is he practiced, dude. This is like someone who didn't just like approach painting as a hobby or something
No.
that like, oh, I know about art and I'm just gonna do it. Like he was someone who earnestly practiced like a musician would, where you just like over and over and over again, paint, throw it away, paint, throw it away, paint, throw it away.
Yep.
Like and like by the time he gets to the age where he does that, 2 years of just an explosion of artistic production, he's so skilled at like what he's doing with his hand, with his brush, that not everybody could do that. Like it would take a
Absolutely
long
not.
time to combine that level of skill with that level of just pure insanity, like
Yeah.
the other element of Van Gogh and them coming together. Like,
The emotion. Yeah.
yeah, right. You got to have all of that happening. And I think it's very rare, actually, that you could find someone that far gone into like whatever mental illness he had, but at the same time, an extraordinarily skilled draftsman and
Yeah.
skilled like artist. That's hard to find.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Only Taylor Swift has that.
Mostly Taylor Swift.
Taylor
Yeah.
Swift, Post Malone, they have it, but other than that, nobody else. This was really
I
fun.
was I
Yeah.
was sort of like hoping that this would maybe this conversation would let me get past Van Gogh a little bit.
No
So
way, dude.
I'm hoping not past like done, but like
Closure. I'm
a
looking for closure.
closure. Yeah, a little bit,
All it makes me want to do is read the book again. Like I was just like, dude, I want
Yeah.
to go back and be in that world again because I don't know, it's painful, but it's also just so instructive as to like what life really is, and like that's
I
part of like,
couldn't put it
yeah,
down. I could
yeah,
not put it down. I think it's interesting you read it during the pandemic, but
yeah,
yeah, that
thousand
makes a lot of
pager.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I highly recommend it to those who are listening. It's called Van Gogh: The Life by Stephen Naifeh and Gregory White Smith, Pulitzer Prize winning authors of Jackson Pollock, which will be what we discuss next time when I get that book and actually read it.
It's good. It's good. It's good so far. It's
You
good
like
so
it?
far. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually reading another 1,000 page biography right now of Walt Disney. It's like the
Oh,
like
oh
ultimate, and it
Jesus.
is as detailed as the Van Gogh. Like I've read 200 pages and he's still like a kid on the farm. Like it's
Wow.
crazy and it's like enormously instructive in a different way, but kind of, I don't know, kind of in a similar way. Like
Yeah.
Walt Disney's a very different character, but he's also someone who was able to create a visual style that like became a language of how people understand the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of incredible.
And
So
and a Nazi.
yeah, a little bit. Wait, was Disney and not? Well, I haven't got to the Nazi part yet, so I'll have to update you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Nazi leaning.
yeah, Henry Ford is more the Nazi. I
Oh
think
yeah, he's a straight up Nazi. Yeah.
yeah, Disney. Well,
Disney
yeah.
like just hated Jewish people. Yeah.
And yeah, the Disney World War II propaganda is fucking unbelievable. Like all the
Oh
like
yeah.
Donald Duck anti-Japanese shit. Like
Oh
it's
yeah. It's
gnarly.
incredible.
Yeah.
I hope that never goes away. It's like, let's hope the internet
My
doesn't
favorite YouTube
crash.
channel is Disney World War II propaganda. Yeah. All right, Peter. Well, thank you so much for going down the Van Gogh rabbit hole with me. This was fun.
Yeah, that was great. Oh my God.
Well, okay, my friends, I think that's going to wrap it up for Nostalgia Trap this week. I want to thank Peter Sabatino for staying up late in London so that we could record this conversation. I really enjoyed talking with him about Van Gogh, and I hope you enjoyed listening to our thoughts on this book. Go check it out. It's called Van Gogh, The Life by Stephen Naifeh and Gregory White-Smith. I'll have a link to it in the episode description, along with a link to our Patreon page. We appreciate you checking that out and perhaps subscribing if you like what you see or hear. I guess it's a podcast, right? So hearing is the key to all of this. Thanks so much, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.